Welcome back, dear learners, from the ad break. We are now going to do the creditors ledger. In the creditors ledger, when we are preparing it with the information from your creditors allowances journal. So remember, we have already prepared the creditors allowances journal, which you can see right before you. And then now what we are going to do is to prepare the creditors ledger. When you do that, it is important for you to remember that when you post into the creditors ledger, the debit is a minus. In other words, when you post into the debit, those amounts will be subtracted. But when you post to the credit, then those amounts will be added. So when we are posting from the CAJ, we will be posting to the debit side. Now, here is our creditors allowances journal again, and then we now have our creditors ledger. So we have three creditors. We have Pink Traders, T Brown, as well as S Gray Traders. Now, at the beginning, we already owe our creditors some amount. We'll start with J Pink. So we have account rendered 9,000. That's a credit balance. That is an amount that we're already owing. And then we then come on the 12th, as you see here. On the 12th, we have an allowance of 3,400. So we're going to take the date is going to be on the 12th. Then I'm going to say debit note number 25. And then remember, on the credit, it is a plus, but on the debit, it is a minus. And then you're now going to say your debit note, you put it on the debit side because it is an allowance. And then you now take your calculator, you say 9,000 minus, because the debit note is on the debit side, minus 3,400, and you end up now with 5,600. And then let's come to T Brown Traders. T Brown Traders, the balance is already 11,000 on the credit side. And then on the 7th, which is what you see over here, there is an allowance of 960. And we have agreed already that our allowances, we put them on the debit side. That means my 960 will be on the debit. So 11,000 minus 960, it should give me 10,040, which is a credit balance. Let's go now to the last creditor, who is S Gray. So S Gray, the account rendered is 15,760. This is what we are owing before the allowance. Then on the 2nd, as you can see over here, we have an allowance of 158. So I'll come here now. My debit note is number 23. So it is the same as this one that I have here. And then I'm going to bring it again to the debit side. There is the debit side. So I have my 15,760. And when an amount is on the debit side, I subtract it. So I'm subtracting 158. Then I remain with 15,602. The other way that you could have done this was to start with S Gray, T Brown, and J Pink. That is normally how you would have done it. All right? And then after that, then we can quickly now post to our creditors list. Let's see how we would do that if we were preparing the creditors list. It is very important that I keep reminding you that when we are posting to the creditors ledger, the debit is a minus, as you saw here, and the credit is a plus. All right. Now, let's quickly move on to our creditors list. So the creditors list, it is simply a list of all our creditors, indicating how much we owe them. So if you look here, remember, a creditors list, it is indeed, as I've said, a list of all creditors that is compiled by a business. So the first creditor that we have is J Pink. And how much do we owe J Pink? 5,600. So you have it there. The next one is T Brown Traders, and we owe them 10,040. Then I have my 10,040. And then the last one is S-grade traders, and we owe them 15,602. That is that one. Now, please quickly punch this in your calculator. If you say 5,600 plus 10,040 plus 15,602, it should give you an amount that is 31,242. That should be the same amount that you'll find in your creditors control account. Now, dear learners, I want us to see now the next aspect is going to be posting to the trial balance. Here is our general ledger. So from the general ledger, we will post to the trial balance. But again, very important that you remember the dead click, that when you're posting to the trial balance, you need to remember the dead click. What is it that you debit and what is it that you credit? So let's quickly do it together. The first amount that we have is on the creditors control. We have agreed that the creditors control is a liability that increases on the credit side. And my amount is 31,242. So I'm going to come here. Creditors control is a balance sheet account section amount. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say creditors control. Creditors control. Remember, here I have a debit, here I have a credit. So my creditors control is going to go to the credit side, and it will be 31,242. Let's quickly go to the next one, which is trading stock. We said it earlier on. Trading stock is an asset which increases on the debit side. So I'm going to take my debit balance, which will appear here as balance brought down. Remember, I'm taking this amount down, which is 46,640. So when I come here, I'm now having my trading stock. I'm having my trading stock, and the amount is going to come to the debit side, 46,640. And then lastly, I have my packing materials. So you can see here I have a total, and then I also have 158, which is an allowance. So it comes now under my nominal accounts. So I'm going to say packing materials. All right. And then I'm going to get the difference then, which is the difference between 3,000 and 158. If you punch that in your calculator, you should get 2,842. Why am I putting it under nominal accounts? Because packing materials are an expense. Now, dear learners, we're now going to move on to the next aspect, which is how these transactions affect the accounting equation. Remember, your accounting equation is assets is equal to owner's equity plus liabilities, and it should balance. Your accounting equation should balance. So here I have two transactions. The first one reads, returned packing materials not ordered, 158. So, two things you have to remember, that packing materials are an expense and creditors control are a liability. So let's see how these two will affect the accounting equation. When packing materials are returned, which account do we debit? We debit our creditors control and we credit packing materials. Why? Because it is an expense. So once an expense is decreasing, we credit it. All right? And then it is very important, dear learners, that you get to understand the effect it will have either on the assets, owner's equity, or the liabilities. Let's look at it again. Once you return packing materials, you are going to debit your creditors control. And remember, creditors control is a liability. So once you debit your liability, you're going to get a minus. That means your liability is decreasing. You debit a liability, that means your liability is decreasing. So you get a minus. And the moment you credit an expense, that means your expense is decreasing. So owner's equity then. Remember, expenses in their own regard, they decrease owner's equity. But when that expense then decreases, it then increases owner's equity. That's why you find there is a plus here. And then, is there any effect on the assets? No. That's why you find I have put 0. You should always put a 0 when there is no effect on any particular amount. And then you would find that on my other side of the accounting equation, if I say plus 158 minus 158, the net effect also becomes 0. And here I have another 0. Let's quickly look at the last transaction. Omission of 15% trade discount on an invoice of 6,400 for trading stock. So again, if you calculate 15% of 6,400, we have done that earlier on, where you say 6,400 multiply by 15%, you will get 960. So this trade discount was omitted on the purchase of trading stock. Which account do you debit? You debit your creditors control. And once you debit creditors control, your liability is decreasing, minus on the liabilities. And then you should now think, what other account is going to be affected? This is on trading stock. So that means I'm going to come now and credit my trading stock. Once I credit trading stock, which is an asset, that means my asset is decreasing. I find myself with a minus 960. Is there any effect on my owner's equity? No. Hence, you find there is a 0. So, on my assets, minus 960. On my liabilities, minus 960. Dear learners, thank you so much for joining me in today's class. It has been a pleasure having you. Hope to see you again next time. Please take good care and goodbye.